I keep having the same conversation with men in their 40s and early 50s, and every single one of them is saying something the people around them cannot explain. They're telling me, quietly, without any drama about it, that they're not interested, not in dating in general. Specifically, not interested in the women who are suddenly showing up now with a different kind of energy than they had 10 or 15 years ago. And the people around these men, their families, their married friends, sometimes the women themselves, keep reaching for the same explanation. He's bitter, he's carrying a grudge, he never got over it, and now he's finally getting his little moment of power. And every single time, that explanation is wrong. These aren't bitter men. Bitter men are loud. Bitter men bring it up. Bitter men need you to know what was done to them. The men I'm talking about don't bring it up at all. They're calm. They're settled. They've got their own thing going. They're just not available in the specific way they used to be available. And what's interesting is that they're not even that worked up about it. They're not savoring it. They're not sitting around waiting for this moment. It just arrived, and they looked at it clearly, and the answer was no. And the no didn't feel complicated. And if you're one of those men, here's the part that probably surprised you most. You expected to feel something when this happened. You thought when the attention finally came around from the direction it used to refuse to come from, you'd feel it. Some version of satisfaction, some version of finally. But when the moment actually arrived, what you felt was almost nothing, not anger, not triumph, just a kind of quiet. And that quiet caught you off guard more than any rejection ever did. That's what I want to talk about, because that quiet is not what everyone around you thinks it is. And once you understand what it actually is, you're going to stop questioning it. You remember what it was like when you were younger, not the version you tell people, the cleaned up version, the real version. You were the guy who showed up. You were consistent. You said what you meant, and you meant what you said. You called when you said you would. You paid attention to what she told you, actually remembered it, actually cared. You made an effort that felt natural because it came from somewhere real, not because you were performing it for an audience. And it didn't land the way you thought it would. You were right there, available, genuine, and you were essentially invisible to the specific women you actually wanted. Not all women, not in every situation, but the ones you were drawn to, the ones where it actually mattered to you, those were the ones who seemed to be looking right past you at something else. And you knew what the something else was. You could see it. The guy who didn't call back. The one who kept things just unclear enough to stay interesting. The one who made her work for it. Made her wonder. Made her feel like she was in something slightly unpredictable. That guy got the attention. And the gap between what he was offering and what you were offering was not a gap you were willing to close by becoming someone you weren't. So you stayed who you were. And who you were kept getting the same result. You got the speech more than once. You know the one. You're such a great guy. You're going to make someone really happy. I just don't feel that way about you. And the brutal part of the speech wasn't the rejection. It was how reasonable it all sounded. You couldn't even argue with it. She wasn't wrong that she didn't feel that way. She wasn't lying about any of it. And understanding that, being mature enough to understand that, didn't take any of the sting out. It just meant you sat with the sting alone and didn't even have the relief of being angry about it. So you didn't make a scene. You nodded. You said you understood. You left. And then you did the thing most people never talk about. You kept going anyway. You didn't collapse. You didn't decide the whole thing was rigged and build a personality around that. You didn't turn it into a story you told at every opportunity. You just kept living, kept working, kept moving through your weeks the way anyone moves through their weeks when there's no other option. But to keep moving. And while you were doing that, something happened that you weren't planning for and weren't even aware of while it was happening. You started building a life that was actually yours. Not a replacement life, not a backup plan you settled for because the real thing didn't work out, a real one. You figured out what your mornings were supposed to look like when nobody else's preferences were in the room. You picked up the things that actually interested you, not the things that sounded good on a date. The real things, the things you'd go back to every time because they were genuinely yours. You got better at your work because you put the time in. You built friendships with people you actually liked because you liked them, not because they came attached to a relationship. You got comfortable in your own space, arranged the way that actually works for you, not negotiated into something that half works for two people. And you got good at being by yourself without it feeling like a problem. That sounds like a small thing. It's not a small thing. Most people never figure that out because they move from one relationship to the next without ever sitting in their own company long enough to find out what it feels like. You sat in it, at first maybe because you had no other choice, but after a while because it turned out to be fine, better than fine. It turned out your own company was something you could trust. None of this was a strategy. You weren't playing a long game. You weren't storing up points to cash in later. You were just living through the years the way anyone lives through years, one thing at a time, and the years did what years always do. They left a mark. Except in your case, the mark was a kind of solidity, a settledness, a genuine comfort with who you are and how your life runs that didn't come from someone else telling you it was okay. It came from you living it every day until it just became true. And then the world around you shifted. The men she used to choose started looking different at 40 than they did at 28. The excitement wore thin. The unavailability that felt like mystery turned out to just be unavailability. The relationships that started electric kept ending the same way, and after enough times ending the same way, you can't pretend it's a coincidence anymore. The things she'd been telling herself about what she wanted started running into the things she'd actually experienced, and those two things didn't match up as well as they used to. So she looked around, and when she looked around she noticed you, or she noticed what you had become, which from the outside looks like exactly what she's been looking for. Stable, settled, capable. A man who has his life together in a way that's real and visible and solid. Maybe she reached out directly. Maybe she started showing up through mutual people. Maybe she just became warmer, more attentive, more present than she'd ever bothered to be before. However it came, you recognized it. You'd been on the other side of that shift in energy. You knew exactly what it was, and you waited for the old feeling to come back. You waited for the pull you remembered from when you were younger, when just being in the same room as her could make the whole rest of the day feel different. You thought maybe it just needed a ute. Maybe one real conversation, and the door would open up again the way it used to be open. But the door wasn't stuck. The door was just done. What you felt instead was that quiet, that flat, calm, almost indifferent quiet. And underneath it, if you're being honest, maybe a small amount of something that felt almost like sadness, not because you wanted her back and couldn't have her, but because you remembered the version of yourself that wanted her so badly, and now you couldn't find that version anywhere inside you. That guy was gone, and the guy standing in his place looked at the situation and just didn't feel the urgency that the old guy would have felt. The wanting wasn't there, and you didn't know what to make of that. Here's what that is. Here's what nobody actually explains, which is why everyone keeps getting it wrong. Wanting is not a thing that sits in you permanently, fully stocked, waiting to be triggered by the right moment. It's not a storage tank that stays full forever no matter what happens. Wanting is alive, and because it's alive, it responds to what happens to it. When it moves towards something and that something moves back, it grows. When it moves towards something and that something consistently doesn't move, it doesn't just stop and wait patiently. It redirects. Slowly, without drama, without a decision being made, it finds somewhere else to go. Into the work, into the friendships, into the mornings, into the life you were building without realizing you were building it. It fills the actual space of your actual days, and after enough years of that, your life doesn't have an empty place in it shaped like her approval anymore. That's not a choice you made. That's not a wall you built. That's not damage. That's just what time does when wanting doesn't get met. It doesn't hold a grudge. It doesn't wait by the door. It just moves. And it moved. And what it moved into is the life you're living now. And here's the other thing nobody says out loud. What she wants at 45 isn't actually you, not the real you, the one who exists now. What she wants is the version of you that was still open enough to be completed by someone else. The version that needed someone to arrive and make the whole thing feel like it was adding up to something. That version finished the job on his own. He built the thing. He lived in it. He figured out it was enough. So what she's actually looking for doesn't exist anymore. And even if you said yes, she'd find that out fairly quickly, because the man who was available to need her, that man is gone. And let's actually look at what saying yes would cost you, because the people around you make it sound like nothing. She's different now. People grow. What do you have to lose? And if you let that framing do its work without stopping to actually look at the real picture, it can almost sound reasonable. But look at the real picture. She's coming in with years of decisions behind her that you had no part in and that made her who she is now. She's coming with her timeline, her terms, her needs, her kids if she has them, her history, her idea of what this is supposed to look like and how fast it's supposed to go. She's coming in having finally figured out that stability and consistency are what she wants, which means she's now interested in exactly what you were offering years ago, except you'd be providing it now, starting from here, working it around everything she already is, at a point in your life when your life already works. Think about what your day actually looks like, Rigo. Now. You wake up and the morning is yours. Nobody's mood to read before you've had a cup of coffee. Nobody's schedule cutting into yours. You know what you're doing today and you do it. You come home and the place is the way you left it. Your money goes where you decide it goes. Your weekends have the shape you gave them. Your evenings are yours. Your decisions are yours. Your time is actually yours in a way that people inside relationships forget is even possible because they haven't felt it in so long. All of that is on the table the moment someone else comes into your life, not because relationships are wrong, but because that's what they actually cost. And you'd be paying that cost for a specific person who, when you were younger and still becoming who you are, looked at what you were offering and decided it wasn't what she was looking for right now. Not because of some terrible misunderstanding, just because the options she was choosing over you seemed more interesting at the time. And now those options didn't work out the way she thought they would. So now you look interesting, and you're supposed to take that as a compliment and open the door. But you're looking at the real situation. The attention isn't coming because you became worthy of it. The attention is coming because the alternatives stopped working out, and you can feel the difference. When you actually sit with the honest version of what's being offered and what it would cost, the quiet you feel starts to make complete sense. Bitter men don't feel quiet. Bitter men feel the pull even when they're pushing back. They're still in it, still circling the old hurt, still needing something from the situation. You're not in it anymore. You stepped out of that orbit so gradually you didn't notice you were moving, and by the time this moment arrived, there was nothing left pulling you toward it. Your family doesn't understand this. Your friends who are married, some of them, will sit there in their own exhaustion and tell you that being alone is no way to live. The woman herself probably thinks that if she's just patient enough, warm enough, present enough, eventually you'll soften, that you're testing her the way she used to test you and you just need to see that she's serious this time. What none of them can see is that you're not performing unavailability. You're not strategically holding back to create tension. You're not waiting to see how much she'll invest before you decide. You're just not available in the way they need you to be, because the thing that would have made you available, the gap, the empty space that she could have walked into, got filled by other things while she was busy elsewhere. The mornings got claimed, the time got spent on things that matter to you, the emotional space got used to build something real. There's no vacancy, not because you put up a sign, just because the space is occupied. And the people who push back on that, who tell you something must be wrong with you for not jumping at this, they're not actually worried about what you're missing. A man who built a life that genuinely works, who doesn't need a relationship to feel complete, is a quiet problem for anyone who's been telling themselves that a relationship is the thing standing between them and feeling okay. Your peace isn't an accusation, but it lands like one. So they call it damage, they call it walls, they call it not being over it. You can let them say it. The life you built is not fragile enough to need defending against someone else's theory about why you built it. Here's what's actually true. You are not broken. You are not hiding behind anything. You are not punishing anyone. You are a man whose life got filled up while he was paying attention to other things. And a full life doesn't have the same hungers a half-built one does. You're not saying no from a place of pain. You're saying no from a place of having enough, real enough. The kind you built yourself with your own time and your own effort, and the kind you know is solid because you've been living in it. Wanting you now is not a qualification, it's information about timing. And timing, as it turns out, is everything. Not because you're keeping score, but because what you needed at 30 was someone to show up while the thing was still open. The thing isn't open the same way anymore. Not closed in anger, closed the way a chapter closes when the story moves on, quietly, completely, without any drama. You don't owe anyone a reopening. You don't owe anyone an explanation for the quiet. You don't owe anyone a second look just because they're finally looking the right way. Your life belongs to you in a way that your life at 30 never quite did, and that is not a loss. That is the whole point. You're not the man she passed over. You're the man that man became while she wasn't watching. And that man doesn't need her to recognize him now to know the choice was worth it. He figured that out a long time ago, on his own, without any help from her. She can see it now. She just missed the part where seeing it would have changed anything. That's not bitterness. That's not a grudge. That's just how time works when you use it well.